Hi, I'm Cliff, and this is my garage, and this is my busted Land Pride rotary cutter. It needs a new blade. Hey, welcome back to the garage, and if this is your first time visiting me, thanks for dropping by. So let me start off by saying thank you. We are almost at 800 subscribers. That's just, to me, amazing and just surprising that, like I said before, I'm just shocked that there are 800 of you that are interested in what I have to say. Now, I started this channel something like 8-9 years ago, and I worked on it for a little while, and then it kind of fell to the wayside. Other things took priority, and I picked it up again about a year ago when there was about 450 subscribers. So we've almost doubled the number of subscribers in just about a year. So I'm excited. Thank you so much. We're about to hit 800, and we're on our way to 1,000, so that'll be awesome. We hit 1,000. That's when YouTube lets me start monetizing, and I can start making like a whole $12 or $15 a month off of this. So seriously, I'm never going to make any real money off of this. I do this because I love teaching, I love sharing, and thank you for watching and sharing and just being a part of my gang here. Thanks. So the other day I was mowing in one of the back areas of our property here. We have about 10.5 acres, and over the winter a lot of it had gotten overgrown. So I was back there mowing it down, and I also was clearing out some areas that I hadn't had a chance to clear out in a while. So I was mowing over some kind of moderate sized trees also in the 2, 3, 4 inches. Anyhow, I had just finished running over one of them, not particularly big one. I don't remember actually hitting anything or hearing a loud thump, but all of a sudden the rotary cutter began shaking like crazy. And so I shut off the PTO, and I thought, okay, it got spun around. One of the blades is jammed on the inside position, and it's just out of balance. So I lift up the rotary cutter, look underneath, and sure enough, here's one blade poking straight out the way it's supposed to. Other blade's not there. I thought, oh my goodness, what did I do? Did it come loose? And I look up and I see, the bolt that holds on the blade and a little piece of the blade. The rest of the blade is not there. So I walked back about 20, 30 feet, and sure enough, I found it. It had snapped off at the bolt hole. Now, like I said, I don't remember hitting anything particularly hard. I think that at some point it just began developing a crack from stress, and slowly the crack spread to the point where stress was too much, and it just snapped off when it hit something relatively minor. I called my local dealer and found out they didn't have any blades in stock, but they could have them in a couple of days. So I ordered them and picked them up yesterday. Now, the reason I got 2 of them, well, there's several reasons. One, when this one broke loose, it put a sizable dent in the fairly heavy side of the rotary cutter here, so I know it let loose with some considerable force, and there's a decent chance that the other blade hit it when this one turned loose. So like I said, just in case that one's damaged, I want to replace it. Also, if you look at this, get them lined up here, there is a noticeable amount of wear. So there's a chance that the old blade with a little bit worn off the end and a new blade that's, well, brand new, there's enough weight difference between the two that it could become unbalanced. And another reason also is that these are relatively inexpensive. I was kind of surprised. They were only like $35 a piece. So for $70 or so, I got a brand new set, and I don't have to worry about any kind of balance or damage problems. Normally, I would just fix this right on the tractor, just use the 3-point hinge to pick it up and repair it. But since we're going to shoot this video, to make things a little clearer, I brought it in here to the garage, and I put it here on my car lift so that we can get a better view of what's going on. Let's start off by picking it up and taking a look underneath. So up underneath, we've got the blade here. Of course, it's a pretty hefty piece of 1/2-inch thick steel, and we've got the blade bolt that goes up through here, and it has a washer and a special locking nut. Now this part here, you'll hear some people call it a stump jumper. The actual real name of it is the dish pan. Okay, so now this is the unbroken blade. Over here, we have the busted off blade. And you can see, hopefully you can see it, the bolt has a little shoulder in here. And when that shoulder goes up against the dish pan, it tightens it up, but it leaves room for the blade to rotate where it's held on. There's a little bit of wiggle room because since that shoulder is hitting the bottom of the dish pan, the head can't pull all the way up tight against the blade. Okay, now you may be thinking, well, that's all well and good. The bolt is nice and tightened up there. The nuts on top, it's all tightened down. It's holding the blade, which is allowed to rotate. But how do you get that nut off to change the blade? Now, you could go at it with something like a crescent wrench and then take a hammer and start pounding on it, trying to loosen the nut. And it, in theory, would work. I can tell you from experience, though, that nut is on there incredibly tight, and for me at least, this didn't even come close to working. Luckily, there is another way to get this nut off. Every rotary cutter I've ever worked on has one of these, and it's an access hole designed specifically to be able to get to the nut that's holding on the blade bolt. Now, like I said, that nut is on tight, and it's hard to get off. The only answer I've found is a good heavy-duty pneumatic impact wrench. This is an Ingersoll Rand titanium 2235. I think they still sell them. There's one on Amazon. I'll give you a link to that. Fantastic. One of the best things I ever bought. Not all that expensive, honestly, for what it can do. I've not found a nut or bolt or something that this thing cannot take care of. Now you're going to need an extension to reach all the way down in there. So yeah, I know it's not a black oxide impact rated extension, but it's a well-made Craftsman. I've used, well, I've actually got like 4 or 5 of these. Never broken one, and since I've got 4 or 5, if I break one now, well, that's okay. I've got more. The reason I've got a piece of tape on here is that since the socket's going to be all the way down in this dark hole, I want to be able to see easily that this nut is turning, because a lot of times these nuts, they turn very, very slowly at first. The way they're designed, they're an integral lock nut, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. Now, one thing I could not find my big set of sockets. We are in the process of renovating the garage, and everything's a bit chaotic, so I couldn't find them. But I did find a nice set of impact-rated sockets on Amazon. Castleman, I don't know. I've never heard of it before, but they seem to be pretty well made, and we'll be checking them out, see how it works out. I've already checked it out. The size we need is a 1 11/16 for these nuts. So, impact wrench, put the extension on. I can get it lined up correctly. Put on our socket. Our hose hooked up, and we are ready to go. Oh, don't forget your hearing protectors. This is incredibly noisy because it's hammering this, and it makes this entire deck ring like a bell. So you really, really want to have good hearing protection. I just bought these 3M Peltors. They're not very expensive, but so far, what little I've used them, they work really, really well. I'll give you a link to these too. Check the description below the video for links to stuff that I'm using. Oh, I just realized something I forgot to mention. You may be wondering that when I start trying to turn this nut, why doesn't the bolt turn with it? Well, inside the hole of where the bolt comes through, there's a keyway cut into it, and on the bolt itself, there's a spline built into the shaft. So that spline fits into that keyway, and that way it locks the bolt in place. So when we're torquing on this nut, the bolt doesn't spin around. Okay.
Unfortunately, I apparently double tapped the camera remote, so I didn't record removing the nut.
Okay, so now we've got the nut off of there. We need to get the bolt out of the hole. It's a pretty tight fit, and plus there's dirt and gunk that's worked its way into the bolt, so it's jammed in there. The best way is to take, I've got a piece of brass rod here, but any kind of a rod or a small piece of like galvanized pipe or something, just put it on the nut and whack it. I'm sorry, not on the nut. Put it on the head, on the bolt, and just whack it. And that takes it right out. So let me show you a couple things on this nut and bolt that are used to hold the blade on. I took them over to the wire wheel and cleaned them up. So here you can see there's that spline I was talking about that it protrudes up. I think you can see it. It protrudes up and it locks into the keyway in the dish pan to keep this bolt from turning. Now, the other thing about this nut here, and I'm not sure, let's try to see if I can catch the light just right. You can see the marks on this side. They're kind of like a couple little lines there. Okay, what that is that the same marks are here. They take this nut and I guess they either put it into a press or some kind of an anvil and either press down on it really hard or wallop it really hard, and it actually takes these two edges and it pushes them in just a bit. It deforms the nut so that when you get down further onto the bolt, it starts binding up and it's a self-locking nut. And so you can take and you can put the nut on this way, but if you turn it back around the other way, okay, it starts jamming immediately. In fact, it barely goes on at all. So when you put this on and you start tightening it up, once it gets down to the point where the head of the bolt or the end of the bolt is starting to get into the section that's been deformed, it starts binding up and locking down. So that's how this is a self-locking nut. It's not apparent at all when you first look at this how this nut locks itself on. But that slight deformation means that this end here is slightly non-circular and it grabs on and really binds onto the nut or onto the bolt. Okay, so we're back up underneath the rotary cutter, and this time it's really down low on the floor, and this is kind of what you'd normally have when you're working on it hanging off your tractor. The problem at this point is putting the blade back on is that when you push the bolt up through here and with the blade on it, there's nothing holding the bolt in place and it just tends to fall right back out. And even if you can kind of get it jammed to where it's holding it, but it's not all the way up in there. So what I do is I just take and get it about in position, make sure you got it lined up with the access hole up above it. And then I've got a piece of 4x4 here that I just stood up on end, got it right underneath there, and lowered the rotary cutter down a little bit. I do that with the, not with the PTO, with the 3-point hitch. Just lower it down and let it push the bolt up in there and hold it. So now we're ready to put the nut back onto the top of this thing. Okay, I put the nut back on, hand tightened it down as far as I can get it. Now it's time to get serious with the impact wrench again. Let's make sure that we've got it on tighten. And let's go. Look how hard it's having to work to get that on. We're still not tightened down. It is straining. Let's see. Oh, I've got it on minimum power. I don't know how I did that. Okay. Let's crank it back up to max power and let's try this some more. There we go. Okay, and the washer is tight. Okay, we're good to go. Let's put the other nut on now. What it is, I picked the rotary cutter back up a little bit, spun the dish pan around to where the second bolt hole is underneath the access hole, and then dropped it back down carefully on top of that 4x4 so that it's holding in place. And I put the blade on and the bolt through. Now, one thing I didn't make clear before is that there is a washer here that sits underneath the nut, between the nut and the dish pan. And so what I'm doing is I'm tightening it down, and then I'm checking the washer. If the washer is still, wiggly, or I can turn it, that means that the nut isn't tightened down enough. So I keep going, I keep checking until the washer is locked in place, and then I tighten it down a little more, and now I know that the nut is fully tightened down. I don't have particularly big hands, but I find it hard to reach in here and get this on. Come on. There. And then put on the nut. I do wish this hole was maybe an inch more in diameter, make this part a lot easier. Okay, let's get on it with the impact wrench and get this thing tightened down. Don't forget your hearing protectors. Max power, tightening. Let's go. Okay, washer is not moving. That went a lot quicker than last time, didn't it? Okay, so watching my tape on here, I can see that this is really not moving at all. So I know the nut is completely down, tightened, and ready to go. I've picked the rotary cutter back up to check and make sure everything is going properly. You want to make sure that the blades haven't bound up, that they're loose, and they can rotate, because the whole idea is that if they hit something, they can bounce backwards and not be rigidly attached and break off, even though, as we've seen, we know they can break off anyway. One thing to make sure of is check your blade height. Okay, so we can see here the blade is about at the bottom edge of the mower. Then we spin it around. The other blade is about the same height. That's an indication that we've got the blades installed correctly. And also, that guards against the highly unlikely case where the dish pan got bent somehow. While you're under here, check the castle nut that's here holding the dish pan onto the shaft. Make sure the cotter pin is in there and that it looks okay, and it looks fine. It's not cracked or anything, so we're good. Now, let me give you one other heads up. When you're putting on the blade, make sure that you put it on right side up. Don't put it on upside down. I didn't catch it on camera, but one of these blades, I did put it on upside down. Not only did I put it on upside down, I did it twice. So don't do that. Okay, I think we're all set to drop this thing down, put it back on the mower, and let's get cutting.